Welcome back to the Constitutional Clarion. This is the second in a series of videos about the Lang government in New South Wales and its eventual demise. It's about the plot by the New Guard to overthrow the Lang government, which provides part of the context in which the Lang government's dismissal by the governor later occurred. It's also a fascinating part of Australia's history and shows how very close New South Wales came to revolution in 1932, something about which most people are unaware. In 1930, the Great Depression had New South Wales in its grip, causing enormous hardship amongst the people of the state. Unemployment was high, and the Conservative government of the time had slashed government spending and public service salaries. Lang's Labor Party, in opposition, offered an alternative to austerity. At the 1930 election, it was voted back into office by the people who were quite desperate for some kind of relief from their financial hardship. As part of the Lang plan for economic recovery, his government refused to pay interest on bonds to British bondholders. The Commonwealth took over payment of that interest to the bondholders, but then engaged in a bitter legal and political battle with the Premier, Jack Lang, in order to recoup its money. Disillusioned former soldiers from World War I reacted by joining groups, including the New Guard, which trained as a paramilitary force to uphold loyalty to the Empire and to fight against communism. It opposed the Lang government and wanted it replaced by a commission of 10 men, with Parliament only meeting when absolutely necessary for 1 or 2 weeks a year. While most of the members of the New Guard were conservative, some of them veered towards fascism and openly supported dictatorship. This was indicated by its use of the raised arm fascist salute, which I'm not going to show here. See my previous video about the law and Nazi salutes in Australia. The New Guard was not only prepared to fight for its belief, but it trained and drilled regularly to ensure that it would win any future confrontation. It was commanded by former military officers, and it was organised on a military basis. The written training instructions, which you can now see online, dealt with weapons handling, discipline, and the use of military formations to crush the anticipated opposition of what they described as mobs of rioters and hooligans. They focused particularly on street fighting, planning to take Sydney block by block. Revolvers, rifles, tear gas and grenades were to be used to clear strongly held buildings, and corner buildings were to be used for observation and fire command. The New Guard even had engineer units so that advances could be made from building to building by breaching internal walls. A key flashpoint at the time was the decision by Lang that it would be he who opened the new Sydney Harbour Bridge rather than the Governor or the Governor-General. This was seen as an insult to the King through the King's representative and a direct challenge to those who were loyal to the Crown and Empire. The New Guard vowed that Lang would not open the bridge. Rumours abounded that Lang would be kidnapped to prevent it. Now, in Australia, where gambling is fairly common, bookmakers even offered odds of 6-1 against the New Guard succeeding in preventing Lang from opening the bridge. The police responded by placing the highest level of protection around the Premier to foil any plots and ensure he did get to open the bridge. The New Guard then shifted away from kidnapping to Plan B. One of its members, Francis de Groot, borrowed a horse called Mick and tacked himself onto the back of the mounted escort at the ceremony. Before Lang got anywhere near the ribbon, de Groot charged forwards, raising his sword and slashing at the ribbon, declaring that he was opening the bridge in the name of the decent and respectable people of New South Wales. But what of the plot to kidnap Lang? Were the new guard no more than fantasists and big noters? Some, at least, were also definitely thugs. On the 10th of May, 8 of their members were convicted and jailed for a violent attack on an alderman. More sensationally, however, the police commissioner announced on the same day as the conviction, perhaps not wanting to disrupt the trial, that the police department had earlier received intelligence about a plot to kidnap Lang, other ministers and high-ranking police officers before the bridge opening and to incarcerate them in the disused Berrima jail. It was alleged that they planned to pressure the governor, Sir Philip Game, to appoint an emergency interim government in the absence of any responsible ministers who could then advise him. The plan was then that he would be forced to hold an election. When the police raided the offices of the new guard, they discovered copies of the plans of Berrima jail. The documents included details of how the political prisoners would be accommodated until after the election and how the jail could be fortified and defended using riflemen and machine gunners. Machine guns, mounted on the central tower, would allow them to cover the whole of the jail and the open area around the jail, which would prevent surprise attacks. The police also seized documents recording the movement of Lang government ministers and senior police officers who had been under surveillance by the new guard for months. Further raids showed plans and details of ammunition and firearms held by the military at various locations in the state, which the new guard intended to use. This suggested that there might have been collusion with some people in the Defence Forces, which resulted in a formal inquiry being held by the Commonwealth. A newspaper, the Labor Daily, adding its own colourful spin, gave the following description of the plot. Quote, "The centre of the fantastic scheme for the overthrow of the government was the picturesque old jail rotting in disuse at Berrima, and here it was proposed to keep the Premier, responsible members of the government, leaders of the Labor Party and the trade union movement, and the chief of the CIB, Mr Mackay, under armed guard, while stormtroops headed by seized tanks terrorised the citizens of Sydney and established a fascist regime." Unquote. Major Beveridge, the Chief of Staff of the New Guard, later publicly admitted in a speech in Grafton that the New Guard did have the plans to Berrima Jail and indeed several other important places, including a brewery. But he argued that if they had wanted Lang, they could have got him 12 months earlier. Besides, he said, if they kept Lang in jail, they would have had to feed him, and they could find much better uses for food than that. The plot to kidnap Lang was later discussed in the Commonwealth Parliament. Senator Dunn read an affidavit from a member of the New Guard who swore that he was one of the men who had been allocated the job of guarding Lang and others at Berrima Jail, and that all aspects of the defence of the jail had been considered, including machine guns, riflemen, numbers of men it would accommodate, water supply, and every military detail. Dunn was then cut off from giving any further details after the government argued that the matter was subject to court proceedings and should not be addressed in Parliament. While there was certainly a plot, it was unclear whether it was all talk or any action had actually been taken to implement it. The police had informants within the New Guard and had been made aware of the plans to seize Lang from his official car as he was being driven along his regular route home on Parramatta Road. According to Lang, he was warned by the police about the day on which the kidnap attempt would occur. Rather than receive additional protection, he insisted on driving himself home in his own private car, knowing that the New Guard was watching for his official vehicle. He made it home without mishap. Whether the new guard would have acted if Lang's official car had made the journey that day remains a mystery. Lang speculated that they realised that their plans had been leaked and that they retreated from the kidnap plan. Others argued that there was actually dissent from within the new guard, which killed off the execution of the plan. On 13 May, just 3 days after the police first publicised the kidnap plot, Lang was dismissed as Premier. Now, I'll do a separate video about that one, but a spoiler alert, it wasn't the new guard, but Lang himself which caused that result. One consequence, however, of Lang's dismissal was the destruction of the new guard, because there was no longer any point in its existence once Lang was defeated in the ensuing election. Without an enemy to oppose, its members just drifted away. As for Berrima Jail, instead of being seized to house political prisoners in a coup d'etat, the daughter of the local police sergeant used it to hold a dance in July 1932 to raise money for the ambulance service. Civil society prevailed over civil disorder, and the dance to the music of time played on. Thank you for watching the Constitutional Clarion. I hope you enjoyed this rather fascinating piece of New South Wales history, and I look forward, as always, to seeing you this time for the next episode, focusing on the dismissal of the Lang government. Goodbye.